Hey everybody, it's your buddy's pal Anthony, and today I want to talk with you about Batman White Knight. This is part of DC Comics' Black Label imprint, which is a brand that lets DC Comics tell more mature stories about the superheroes we all know and love. I had actually seen some panels from the latest story called Batman Beyond the White Knight, and I got curious, and I found that there was some books that preceded it, so naturally I decided to go back to the beginning and take it from there. After the intro, spoilers for Batman White Knight. Steve, hit it please. All right, so this actually is a really enjoyable comic book to me. It wiped away the bad taste that I had after reading Batman Failsafe and The Batman of Gotham. This is really a story about Batman and the Joker. Joker is extra obsessed with Batman in this storyline, and he goes as far as to try to prove the point that, the Batman needs him just as much as the Joker needs the Batman. He tries to prove this point by taking the Joker out of the equation. He doesn't do this by committing suicide or anything crazy like that. He actually decides to go sane. The opening of this book, after a chase which shows a Batman just being a little bit more reckless and not necessarily giving a shit about the casualties he could be inflicting, because you see him driving over a rooftop with the Batmobile and Batgirl's in the passenger seat screaming, "What are you doing? Do you know if this building won't collapse? Do you know if there aren't any people at home? What the hell are you doing?" Stuff like that. And as he's chasing the Joker, he goes through a construction site, and at the last second, Nightwing has to swoop in and grab a construction worker out of the path of the Batmobile. So, this is already setting up a Batman who's just extra fixated, and later we'll come to find out why he's been so, reckless. But in the meantime, it's just, it's like, whoa, okay, this is a little bit different. But anyway, like I was saying, the Joker decides, well, I'm going to prove that you need me as much as I need you. I'm going to go sane. And what happens is there's this big fight throughout this abandoned medical facility that produces pharmaceuticals. Joker's really he's talking the entire time while Batman's just wailing on him, talking about their duality and things of that nature. And at the end of it, Batman's just like, you know what, fine, fuck you, pops a pill bottle and shoves the pills down his throat. During all this, the GCP is present, as well as a mysterious woman that we see in shadow. She's recording this whole thing going on, the beating and Batman forcing pharmaceuticals down his throat. And we'll later come to find out that this is Harley Quinn. She leaks this footage, and it's enough to start a social justice warrior campaign in favor of the Joker, which I was just like, holy shit. This is, I don't know, the writing, it was new, it was refreshing. I hadn't seen that before. Like I said, I'd seen a lot of things, or I felt I'd seen a lot of things before with the other Batman stories. What happens is Joker goes sane after a period of in a little bit of a coma. He eventually, he comes out of it. There's no makeup, there's no green hair. He just, people are calling him Joker. He's like, no, I'm Jack Napier, I'm not the Joker. And that's pretty much his whole defense. And that and some other things. And it turns out, they say, without the Joker craziness, he apparently has an insane IQ, so that's helps him get his acquittal. And we'll actually come to find out, one of the first twists of this book is you actually come to find out that there are two Harley Quinns. So he goes back to his hideout. He's talking to Harley Quinn, who's dressed up kind of like Margot Robbie's Joker in the first Suicide Squad movie. And he's apologizing for all the abuse and the craziness over the years. He actually gets down on a knee to propose to her. She starts laughing. She's like, "Oh yeah, okay, sure. Go dye your hair, put on your makeup, and we're gonna go rob some shit." And he calls her Puddin', and at that point, that pisses her off. She sucker punches him real quick. Like, what the hell are you playing at, and stuff like that. And then next panel we find Harley Quinn dressed up in her classic Jester costume, looking like straight out of the animated series, with the two hyena dogs. And he's like, he wasn't talking to you, he was talking to me, and I accept the proposal, by the way. We'll come to find out that in another shocking twist in this universe, Dick Grayson isn't the first Robin. It actually is Jason Todd. And Jason Todd was captured by the Joker years ago. He was beating him, he was going to kill him, he was torturing him for information to get Batman's true identity, but he wasn't giving it up. Harley sees all this, the real Harley Quinn sees all this, and she decides she can't be a part to it, so she goes out, she, sneakily contacts Batman in exchange for Batman promising that, he'll just take him in. He's not going to kill him or beat him too badly. She'll give him the information. Makes a deal. Batman gets to the location. There's a pool of blood, but there's no body. It's implied that the Joker killed Robin, but all throughout the story, he'll say time and time again that he doesn't remember. And then so the White Knight of the story is Jack Napier. He basically goes on a crusade to prove that Batman is what's making Gotham worse and things of that nature. And he's trying to make all these reforms. He runs for city council, things of that nature. He uncovers a slush fund that was created to basically do repairs for all the damage that Batman causes, but the slush fund has gotten corrupted by the 1%. They're actually, they withhold the funds or they use it, and then they make what they rebuild, they make it so unaffordable for the old people, for the original inhabitants, that they have to move out, things like that. So then that starts to turn the tide against Batman. Even Gordon, he's starting to get fed up with some of the shit Batman's doing, because they have to work with Napier, at a certain point. Like, he just made his case so compelling, and he hasn't broken any laws that they're aware of, even though he does do some shady shit behind the scenes. They have to work with him. They organize something called the GTO, which stands for Gotham Terrorist Oppression Unit, and they actually get Nightwing and Batgirl to join up on this because they're getting fed up with Batman and his extreme shit. He won't listen to reason. Also, we find out that the reason he's being so extreme and not really listening to reason is because Alfred's actually sick and dying in this comic book. So, his little Jiminy Cricket isn't doing his job, so he's just left to his own, darker, more manic and obsessed impulses. But yeah, there are a lot of crazy twists and turns in this story, from Jack Napier taking control of the criminal underworld in a really sick way. He actually gets Clayface, who again looks like the Batman the Animated Series version of the character. He uses a Mad Hatter card to control Clayface, gets Clayface to distill himself down into dust. Napier has a meeting with all the Gotham's supervillains, and they're thinking it's going to be another scheme to like attack Gotham, and they're not quite wrong, but they're going to do this without realizing it. They're going to do this all under Napier's control, because, like I say, he's controlling Clayface, who's powderized himself. Napier took this powder and put it into some alcohol that he serves all the supervillains. Everybody does a cheers, and next thing you know, they're all zombies, slave to Clayface's mind, which is slave to the control headband that Napier has, which he took from the Mad Hatter. And it's really sick, because there's one panel where the second Harley Quinn, who eventually, she goes on her whole story. She wants to get the Joker back. She becomes Neo Joker. She figures out what he's doing. She actually unwittingly finds how he's controlling all of them, and that's because all that's left of Clayface without the powder is his eyes, brain, and a tongue with a Mad Hatter card shoved between his hemispheres. A really gross and cringy moment, but also very cool and like, holy shit. And it's actually crazy, because during this whole comic, I find myself rooting for Napier almost, Granted, he wants to take down Batman, but he also just wants to kind of prove that Batman is the problem. He gives him an ample opportunity throughout this book to join him and like join the GTO and reform how he does things and things of that nature. But Batman, right to an extent, is just convinced that Napier has an ulterior motive, and he's right, because he was controlling the supervillains. But also, if he had just joined up, maybe everything would have worked out for the best. But this was a really interesting story. It was a really fresh take on their dynamic, I thought. I'm not really crazy about how they depict Batgirl a couple of times, because at one point she's confronting Mr. Freeze, who's an ally in this comic, because he's working to help cure Alfred, which will actually help cure his wife Nora of her illness. So again, they're kind of borrowing things from, like, they did that in Batman and Robin. Barbara confronts him at one point, and she's actually confronting him in the Batgirl costume. And, he's just sitting there listening to her. And he's like, oh, so you must be that redheaded assistant that Wayne had with us the other day in the lab. And she looks down and she goes, oh shit, I'm wearing the costume, aren't I? It's like, what? Barbara's always been depicted as this, really intelligent woman. So that just seemed kind of stupid. Granted, she's supposed to be younger in the comic, but, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I'm trying to say there were a couple of things I could nitpick out of it, that being one of them. Anyway, so Napier's plan for the most part is actually successful. He manages to turn public opinion against Batman. He ends up working side by side with Gordon and Batman's allies and Bullock and other GCPD staples to take down Batman, because Batman at one point, when Neo Joker is on the scene, the GTO is trying to handle it. They are handling it pretty well without all the massive destruction, but Batman he can't let Joker win. He can't let Joker do this. He's convinced he's the only one. He's the only one. He actually causes so much destruction that finally pisses Jim Gordon off, and he issues a arrest warrant for the Batman, which leads to them setting up a sting for him, which actually was kind of a cool moment because Nightwing steals a Batmobile for Gordon to drive, which turns out to be the Michael Keaton Batmobile. And they lay this trap for Batman, which actually he falls into, which just goes to show you how, like, you know, utterly obsessed and reckless he's getting. And it comes down to a fight between Napier and Batman. Batman has just been in this really bad car crash, and Napier is able to beat him, not out of hand, but still able to defeat him, which was also refreshing because, again, the other two stories I've just read, Batman, you know, got his ass kicked by this giant robot and pretty much was able to shrug it off. So that was nice to see Batman who, you know, isn't all powerful. After this fight, Neo Joker, the second Harley Quinn, she makes her move. She actually uses a giant freeze cannon, which was constructed by Mr. Freeze's father back in World War II. We get a whole lot of backstory where Freeze's father was a Nazi, and, you know, he grew up with that. He didn't approve of Nora, who I guess we find out is Jewish, because he says, you know, how father didn't approve of my wife and her background. And Thomas Wayne actually brought Victor and Nora over after the war, and like they built this whole secret cave network. What is it with the Waynes and caves under Gotham? His father was working on a giant cryo cannon gun. They're all the Freezes are obsessed with freeze technology. I know that's a little okay, whatever. Anyway, so the Neo Joker gets access to this cannon. She's able to freeze all of Gotham City, and she says, you know, she'll only reverse it if she gets the Joker back. And this takes us back to where we first started, because Jack Napier takes a Batmobile to Arkham Asylum, tells Batman that he needs help, and Batman agrees to help him. They're in the car driving to the scene. It's actually interesting because Batman does start to begrudgingly trust Napier, although he tells him, you know, you have to tell me what happened to Robin. And we'll come to find out that he actually, you know, he's been trying to find out. He goes, I don't know. He speaks of the Joker throughout the book as if he's this, you know, a separate entity, which he is, kind of like Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. So Napier's thinking, Batman's trying to, you know, coach him through what to, you know, think, push past it, focus on Robin, focus on this. And he's able to eventually find out that the Joker wanted Robin to give up Batman's secret identity. Robin was refusing the whole time he was being tortured. But then, you know, he made it apparent that he was about to kill him. So he's like, you know, all right, any last words? And then Jason breaks, and he's like, I wish I'd never met Bruce Wayne. So in what he thinks is his final moments, he gives up Batman's secret identity. And then, surprisingly, the Joker doesn't kill him. He lets him go. And this rattles Batman because he's like, wait, Jason's alive? And can't really deal with that right now because they're going to go deal with the Neo Joker. They do that. It's a whole big battle. Pretty cool stuff going on. And it's actually Harley Quinn, the original, who gets the knockout blow on the Neo Joker. And part of Batman's willingness to team up with Napier was as long as he would give a full confession about how he used the supervillains to cause some of the chaos that Batman tried to stop. So, you know, proving that he was setting Batman up to cause more destruction, to push his own agenda. So Napier agrees to do that. They win the day. Napier's confession is aired. He's being taken back to Arkham Asylum, but this time he's being taken to a nicer cell because why not? They appreciate what he's doing, so they decided to give him a nicer cell. And while they're doing this, Harley decides now's the time she wants to take him up on his offer from earlier in the book, and they ask Batman and Gordon to stand witness while they get married. They have the whole ceremony, and then at the last second, after Harley says I do, when it's Jack's time, all of a sudden it's not Jack anymore. He is lost to the Joker personality, which has reemerged. Joker screams I do, kisses her, and then you hear laughter. And then in another panel, you see Neo Joker, Harley 2, in her own cell in Arkham, and she's just like, oh, he's back. It's actually really cool because one of the last twists in this story is something you really don't expect. After the fight, after Napier, or Joker again, is back in Arkham Asylum, Batman goes to Harley and they have a conversation, and they're talking, and he's like, you know, why'd you do it? I know it's you. You created the pills that made him sane for a while they were effective. And Harley's surprised, but, you know, she compliments him on being, you know, the world's greatest detective. saying that even Jack didn't figure it out, but he actually says, no, that's the one who told me. Harley tells him that she did it because somebody had to break the stalemate, because while, yeah, the Joker was the one terrorizing Gotham, Batman really wasn't helping matters. So it's interesting, because to me, with this piece of information, yeah, Napier was supposed to be the White Knight in the story, but in a way, to me anyway, Harley's really the White Knight of this story, because if it wasn't for her, yeah, okay, granted, it didn't go perfectly according to plan because it was a lot of collateral damage, but if it wasn't for her, Napier wouldn't have had his chance to expose the corruption that he did expose, and, ultimately Batman does realize that he has to change the way he does things, which leads us into the final revelation of the story. Finally, Batman comes to his senses a little bit. He realizes he does have to do things a little bit different. He's talking about this with Jim Gordon, who's, Gordon's trying to pretty much almost get things back to the way they were. He's like, Gotham will learn to trust you again, things of that nature. And Batman's like, no, it has to be different. I have to be better. I'm going to tell people who I am. And he does. Or at least the last panel is he takes off his cowl and he reveals himself to Jim Gordon. And that is how Batman White Knight ends. Really good story from start to finish. Again, I thought it was very fresh take on the interaction between him and the Joker. And I would just highly recommend reading this. I'm very excited to read Curse of the White Knight. And now I want to know what you think. Have you read the comic? Are you going to read the comic based on my review? Let me know in the comments and we can discuss it. I am Anthony the Rambling Nerd. You can find me on Instagram under Rambling Nerd. I am part of the Nerd Affiliated Army. Join us. We have great content, reviews, live shows, unboxings. We have it all, and we're only adding more as time goes on. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. Steve, play me out, please.